Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about the two seismic shifts in fiscal incentives that have impacted zones over the last, several years from, the 90s all the way up to now, which is 2022. The first one being one that occurred in 1995 with the WTO, where the subsidies and countervailing measures agreement came into effect January 1st, 1995, and the impact that had on special economic zones. And the second one is a much more recent vintage, which is the OECD and what's happening there with BEPS, base erosion and profit shifting, and the inclusive framework, all of that stuff. So firstly, the back to the 90s, 1995, and this could be arguably the biggest shift. The second one is yet to be seen. I guess that the effects will be known in the years to come, but it could be argued that this one is much deeper, the first one that is, because what it did is one of the major things that zones did was it incentivized exportation and drove export-led growth. And with this agreement, it kind of cut that pathway off for many developing countries in particular. Uh, you just weren't allowed to subsidize exportation or incentivize strict exportation. And in fact, you had to change even the language you use. You had to talk less about exports, even though that's what you really meant, and speak more about trade, right? That could be seen as the larger shift. Um, Many developing countries were given the option, or given, I shouldn't say option, but given the right to extend, or they didn't have to be compliant immediately, and they were given time, and there were extensions granted subsequent to that. But as of, I think, 20, 2012, I think, or 2015. No, 2015, 2015, 2016. I think all developing countries were supposed to be over. The least developed countries are still exempt, but they can still exempt, or incentivize exportation directly. So the incentives that would be given would be contingent upon, for example, you exporting a certain amount of product, and only a certain amount of product would be allowed to pass from the zone into the domestic territory. So that was basically cut out. So that had a deep impact on zone policy and zone orientation, and how zones were being used as catalysts for development and job creation and all of that stuff. It didn't prevent it, it didn't stop it, and didn't slow it, because subsequent to that, as the as UNCTAD has confirmed in 2019, zones have grown tremendously, and have multiplied many times over since that date. Now, the more recent vintage of tax reform that's coming, that's global in nature, is the OECD and its base erosion, the inclusive framework, and that essentially is driving a global minimum income tax. So one of the incentives, fiscal incentives granted by government, oftentimes is a reduction in corporate income tax rate. Sometimes it goes all the way to zero. They pay, investors pay nothing, or they pay a very low rate. So the OECD has said, and the inclusive framework, as it says inclusive, has gone wider and included many countries, basically almost every country on the globe or on the earth is involved in some way, shape, or form, and they've agreed to a 15% minimum, 15%, right? So countries have options. They can either, if they were below 15%, they can change their rate to being 15. If they were above 15%, they don't have to do anything, or they could equalize it and make it 15. Or The third option is you do nothing. Even if you're below the 15% threshold, say you're 10%, right? You can do nothing. However, the um, the country of origin from which the FDI, foreign direct investment, came from has the right to top up and collect that difference, that 5% difference. So you're at 10, you're attracting foreign direct investment, at 10%, I'll charge you 10% corporate income tax. And, that sounds great. People come in, amongst other things, of course. They come in, they invest. Now, the that's the host country. The exporting country, or the country that's sending out the FDI, can say, well, oh, that's great. I have no problem with that. But when the company, my company, the company that has left my country and invested in your country, repatriates their profits, bring their profits back, I'm going to say, well, I have the right to top up that minimum. And even though we may have a double taxation agreement, I can say, hey, yeah, you of course are going to say, the company's going to say, well, I've been taxed already, don't tax me again. However, I'm going to say, yes, that's true. However, you're short by 5%. So I can top that up. Now, why this is one of the reasons why, I shouldn't say why, because there are multiple policy issues here. Why this is so important is that the developing countries are going to find it very challenging to justify giving up that extra 5% because it's going to be collected anyway. Before, in the past, it wasn't being collected. There was no top up. But now that with that top up, it's going to be hard to say, hey, I'll just let that go. No, that's some additional tax revenue that you could be adding to government coffers locally that you're giving up. And there are far more implications to this, and we'll deal with this at another time in another episode. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, like, share. If you want to see me do a particular topic, please leave a comment down below and I'll get right back to you.